Uh, Hi. When I was a really young kid, to the point where I couldn't even remember it, my dad took me to a movie theater. In the middle of watching the film after having a large soda, I really had to pee. So my dad took me to the restroom. I found the nearest urinal and immediately started peeing there. I look to my right and also see a man peeing, just a few urinals down. I turn to my dad and say,
Dad, he has a penis too!
to which my dad recalls the man's face turning a very bright red almost immediately. Less than a second later, you hear a zip, and the man made a beeline to the door.
When I was younger, in elementary school, there was a girl who was supposed to be my best friend. She was constantly bullied because she was kind of poor and she smelled and she picked her nose a lot. She was always picking her nose. One day, she was crying and asking me what she could do to make the bullying stop. And I told her that it was okay that she picked her nose, that it was normal and it was good for her. Because deep down, I knew that I picked my nose and I didn't want to feel bad about it. So I told her that it was good for her to pick her nose. And she did, and the bullying never stopped. And I always felt responsible. Please don't hate me.
So Dolan has pica, which means he gets weird food cravings for non-food, and also has trichotillomania, which is basically when you pluck out your hair. When he was 10, Dolan used to pluck his hair out and nibble off the roots. That's it. Long story short, he usually gets a craving for his own bodily hair, and anyone else's is nasty. Although it was the worst when he was at that age, he still does it. Dolan also picks at and eats scabs and acne as well as dry skin. When it comes to actual food, he used to eat sugar packets at restaurants whenever his dad went to the bathroom. He would also sneak them home in his sweatshirt pockets. Around the same age, Dolan would put ketchup on anything and everything. One he remembers is lettuce and ketchup.
When Gergak was 18, he bought a bunch of booze with a fake ID. He got drunk for the first time and remembered watching a video about how it's illegal in North Carolina to have sex in a position other than missionary. So Gergak and his girlfriend decided to have sex in cowboy style. They kept the curtains pulled up and they recorded it. Later that night, they went out and saw a police officer. Gergak, still wasted, pulled up the video, got the officer's attention and showed him. About the time the cop slammed his face into the roof of the patrol car and cuffed him, Gergak realized that law was actually enforced. He was in jail for about 2 days until he was bailed out.
A couple of years ago, Mikhailom lost his grandfather to leukemia. A month after his grandfather's passing, he had a dream about the two of them playing a game of chess. It wasn't too weird until his grandfather began breaking down in the middle of the game and kept saying, not yet, don't go yet. Then he looked at Mikhailom with a horrifying looking face. It was a twisted expression of pain and sadness, but his eyes were missing. All Mikhailom saw were empty sockets. As his grandfather repeated what he had said earlier, Mikhailom woke up to the sound of his alarm clock. He thought it was just a dream, until he saw the chessboard on the floor. It was always kept on the top of his dresser.
In high school, Gergak's best friend had a huge crush on Gergak's sister. Every time they hung out, Gergak's friend would ask about her. When he went to Gergak's house, he would be totally distracted and not listen to what Gergak was saying. Gergak was getting real sick of it, so he decided to tell a lie to kill his friend's crush once and for all. He convinced his friend that his sister was actually a transgender brother who had a prosthetic hand. Took some convincing, but his friend eventually bought it and lost all interest in her. Gergak wasn't going to win a Best Brother award anytime soon, but at least he got his friend back.
Honeybits worked tech support for a company that sold tax calculation software to accountants. This was in the late 90s, so it was pretty new technology and many of their clients were older. One of her first calls was from an elderly gentleman who was very nice and patient, and he told her that the forms weren't being filled out as they should be. Honeybits went through the simple fixes, then the advanced fixes, uninstalled, reinstalled, and after about 3 hours on the phone, she just didn't know what to do. She was pretty savvy with computers and software, so Honeybits knew she wasn't missing anything. The old man seemed to know enough to do the basics, so she was confident he wasn't doing anything that could have been overlooked. After reinstalling, Honeybits had the gentleman literally tell her his every move. Turn on the computer, move the mouse to the program icon, click twice on the icon, move the mouse cursor to the start icon, open the form, and click on the first box. He then said nothing happened when he clicked on the form. She asked him if anything was happening on the screen. What he told her next solved everything in a second.
On the computer screen? I thought the mouse printed everything onto the form itself.
Yup, he had the computer mouse on the paper tax forms, expecting the mouse to fill in the forms by printing on them.
When Nixium was younger, he and his friends got together to prank call a bunch of pizza places. He pretended he was throwing a party and made up totally elaborate pizza orders. Then when the person on the line asked for a delivery address, Nixium would shout, "Nowhere!" and hang up. They did this a bunch of times, and then Nixium's phone started ringing. It was the police calling. Nixium knew his parents would kill him if they found out, so he put on a really deep voice and pretended to be his father. The cop explained that there'd been prank calls coming from this number, and Nixium acted like a shocked parent. He held the phone away and pretended to yell at his son. Pretty soon he was putting on two voices to play two separate roles, the father and the son. He acted out this huge argument that ended with the father grounding his son. When it was over, Nixium got back on the line to apologize to the police officer. The police officer accepted Nixium's Oscar-worthy performance. He said it was good to see parents still disciplining their kids and dropped all charges.
Melissa was in 6th grade. The boys at her school started flushing paper towels down the toilet. The school principal made a rule that before the boys entered the bathroom, they had to empty their pockets and show the teacher they had no contraband to flush. When they were done in the bathroom, they were forced to dry their hands outside of the bathroom while their teachers watched them. The 6th graders still have that rule, and if someone breaks it, they are forced to wear a diaper and get 2 weeks of detention.
When Dolan's bro was a kid, he was riding his bike when out of nowhere a snake appeared right in his path. He didn't want to hit it, so he pulled the handbrake hard, but it was only the front handbrake, and he was going so fast he flipped off his bike and landed on his head and skid along the pavement for at least 15 feet. When he finally stopped skidding, he looked behind to find his leg was twisted, his kneecap was discolored, and he left a trail of blood. He went to the hospital and the doctor told him he was lucky he didn't break his neck.
During a normal day at high school, Doopy was at her locker and had her earphones in, listening to Hate It, Huge Ego. Suddenly, she heard a familiar tune that wasn't on her MP3. It was a 12th grader with what looked like a rolling suitcase with a glowing disco ball flashing pink, blue, and green, and playing Hey Hey, You, I Can Be Your Girlfriend as he went down the hallway. A few days later, Doopy's boyfriend and his 2 other friends were having lunch in the cafeteria. Doopy was at her locker, but when she got back to the cafeteria, the same guy was up on a table, blasting music and dancing while disco lights were flashing. Her boyfriend was trying to sleep, and he hated disco music. And you know what? The 12th grader didn't get in trouble.
One day, Mimi had to go to Florida for a business trip, and she decided to go to the hotel pool. The only other person there was a woman on her phone. After she hung up, Mimi and the woman started talking. The woman was on the phone with her husband, so she started talking about him and got out a picture of her husband and 2 kids. Mimi saw her boyfriend in that picture. She asked the woman about her husband's phone number, and it matched the number of Mimi's boyfriend. Mimi had been dating him for 5 years, the same amount of time the woman had been married to him. They called him together to tell him that Mimi was breaking up with him and that his wife was throwing him out of the house. After that, Mimi and her ex-boyfriend's wife became good friends.
Melissa once went to a concert with a friend, but it was so dark she ended up losing her friend halfway through. She turned and said, "Ah, there you are." She started telling her friend all the things she missed while she was away for a good 15 minutes. Suddenly, someone tapped her on the shoulder and she turned around. It was her friend. She asked Melissa, "How do you know that person?" Melissa looked again. She had somehow mistaken her friend for someone else literally the entire time. Melissa got embarrassed and awkwardly shuffled away from her friend's doppelganger.
If you're like a lot of girls in the 21st century, you're gonna want to shave your legs once in a while. In my case, I prefer to wax. And as anyone that's waxed knows, it's a little bit painful. I was complaining to my boyfriend about how it sucks to be a woman because there's societal expectations of having clean, baby smooth legs. And so, He wanted to see how much it really hurt. So, I picked a spot on his body. I won't tell you where, but let's just say we didn't want the one bald spot to be visible to the public. And then I ripped. He screamed in a way that I have never heard anyone scream before. And let me tell you, he definitely now sympathizes with women.
One day, Ghost Toast wanted to call his cousin for a chat. He accidentally got one number wrong when dialing and ended up calling some old lady by mistake. Ghost Toast apologized, but the old lady was drunk and wouldn't listen. She thought Ghost Toast was her ex-husband calling and started hurling abuse at him. Ghost Toast decided to hang up, but the crazy lady called back 5 times just to scream at him. In the end, Ghost Toast had no other choice than to block her number. He made sure never to dial a wrong number again.
So before I had my Doopy channel, I had a different animation channel. And I was also doing animations and cartoons and stuff like that on that channel. One day I received a message from a boy named Jess, and we hit it off immediately. He wanted to be a voice actor for one of my animations, but we ended up becoming really great friends. We added each other on Skype, and we just couldn't stop talking to each other. I was going through a rough time, so I wasn't ready for a relationship quite yet, but he wanted to be with me so badly, and he was really fucking cute. So eventually we got together, and we Skyped every single day. I lived in Florida, and he lived all the way across America and California. It was really hard for us because we ended up falling so in love that being apart was absolutely unbearable. So he scraped up as much money as he could to come fly down and visit me for a day. That day was so amazing, and we ended up spending the entire day just kissing each other. It was insane. Literally hours just making out. Jess is getting embarrassed listening to me talk about this. So when he had to fly back home, I remember it was just so hard for us to be apart from each other, that as soon as he landed back home, we already decided he was gonna move down to Florida to be with me permanently. Like, there was no questions. He saved up as much money as he could from his job at Home Depot to fly down, and we didn't even have enough money for him to get an apartment or anything, but we promised each other that we would make it work, and we did. And we've been together for 6 years now, apart from, breaking up once in a while because, we had our problems, but for the most part, we've been very, very happy together.
Honeybits and Ursa were on a date at Red Lobster. Ursa ordered the snow crab legs but refused to use the crab cracker that was given. Honeybits was getting annoyed seeing Ursa crack the crab legs with her teeth with this savage look in her eyes. Honeybits was about to say something, but before she could, a big chunk of crab meat came busting out of the shell and flew straight into her face. A group at the other table was watching, and they started laughing, but they were obviously trying really hard to hold it together. Honeybits didn't even like crab.
When Slapped Ham was in 5th grade, he noticed this strange lump appearing on his throat. When he asked his mom what it was, she said he was getting into puberty. Slapped Ham didn't quite know what this meant, but he felt proud of this achievement and told all his friends about it. At Slapped Ham's school, every Monday began with students sitting in a circle sharing something that had happened to them over the weekend. Well, of course, Slapped Ham raised his hand and proudly announced,
"I got into puberty."
Slapped Ham's classmates stared at him, and his teacher was totally speechless. To make matters worse, Slapped Ham's dad worked at the school, and all through the week, students went up to him to make jokes and congratulate him on his son getting into puberty. It was a pretty awkward week for Slapped Ham and his family.
One time, while Tolop's parents went into a shop to buy something, he was stuck waiting outside. While he was waiting, Tolop saw a kid, probably about 4 or 5, crossing his legs while he was jumping up and down, clearly wanting to go to the bathroom. Tolop could see the boy's mother talking to someone, and while she was talking, the boy was looking around for a bathroom. He then saw a shop that was selling training toilets for kids who were just learning how to get to the toilet. The boy ran up to one of them, pulling down his trousers, sat down and took a crap in public. Everyone was looking at him, with his mother looking in embarrassment while Tolop tried to contain his laughter. The mother ended up cleaning the crap out of the toilet and paying for it.
Doopy was 9 years old. She went to one of her friend's house for her birthday. It was the first time she had ever been to this friend's house, so she was just exploring the place as the party went on. Eventually, she had to use the bathroom, and had her friend's mom pointed out to her. She walked carefully over to the bathroom and shut the door. But while she was in there, she noticed one of those huge Utz cheese ball containers nearly full to the top with chewed up gum. That's when she decided that if her friend wants to see her, she'll be coming to Doopy's house instead.
Spincess went to a water park once and decided to go on the biggest slide in the park. While she was waiting for her turn, she overheard two girls saying that if you lean right back, you get more of a splash at the bottom. She decided to give it a try and lean right back on the slide. Unfortunately, there was a single nail sticking out along the slide, and as she zoomed past, her hair caught on it, ripping out a whole chunk of her scalp and hair. She didn't know what happened until she got to the bottom and was sitting in a pool of her own blood. Luckily, she made it to the hospital and received a bunch of stitches. Dolan was about 7 years old. He was in the garage at his grandma's house and found some dolls. Dolan was rather curious because he never played with dolls before. Everything was normal until he decided to take off their clothes. He then chopped the dolls into pieces and accidentally cut himself. Dolan's grandma then walked in to see if he was alright. When Dolan turned around, he was covered in blood, crying his eyes out with a naked broken doll in his hands and pieces of other dolls everywhere else. Due to all the embarrassment, he also made a mess downstairs. Dolan passed out after that, either from blood loss or embarrassment. His grandma always changes the subject when he brings up that incident. One day in 6th grade, when Gergak was waiting for school to start, he was sitting on a bench checking his phone, minding his own business. Suddenly, a 7th grader appears out of nowhere and asks Gergak, "Are you gay?" He was startled by the person and the question and said, "No." The guy squinted and asked Gergak, "Can I almond in your ear?" Gergak looked at him, completely confused by the nonsense question. "No." The guy then stood up and yelled, "You will be mine!" Before walking away. Gergak never saw him again.
Hellbent grew up in a small town where everyone was kind of redneck. When he turned 20, he moved to a larger town and got a job with the flooring company. He started falling for one of the girls in the office and thought he could impress her with his hunting skills. So when hunting season came around, Hellbent and his brother went out and shot a 600-pound bear. Hellbent brought the bear to the shop to skin it. Hellbent's boss was a hunter too, so he allowed it. Hellbent's crush came in and saw the huge bear strung up, and Hellbent standing there with a knife covered in blood. She actually thought Hellbent had been attacked by the bear and killed it with a knife. Hellbent's boss backed up that version of the story, and she ended up asking Hellbent out.
Gergak's brother once got salty at him for using his Xbox controller, so he told Gergak that he needed it right then. When Gergak told his brother to wait, he said, "Need it right now, because if I don't play my game, then I have to use someone else's." When Gergak asked his brother what was wrong with his other controller, he said it was the wrong color for his game. It was black, and the one Gergak had was white. Speaking of people who just don't care, for Hellbent's finals, he wrote all the answers from his study guide on his goddamn wiener. When it was time for the test, he pulled his pants 1/4 the way down, whipped out his wiener, and hid it from the teacher. He ended up only getting a B- because his classmates were like, "What the fuck? Why do you have your penis out? Holy shit!"
One year, Emoji was so excited to find out what he was getting for Christmas that he snuck a peek while his parents were out. He very carefully unwrapped his gifts and discovered he hit the toy jackpot. When he was finished, he rewrapped them so they looked exactly how he'd found them. It was the perfect crime. On Christmas morning, Emoji tried not to give his secret away. He tore off the wrapping paper and found an empty box with a note in it. The note read, "I know you peeked at your presents. Christmas is now canceled. Love, Santa." Sure enough, Emoji no longer got those awesome presents. Damn, Santa, you're cold.
One night, Tolop was hanging out in an arcade, playing some Dance Revolution. He was approached by some people who wanted to hire him as a foot double. A pop-punk band called The Starting Line was filming a music video, wanted to film him playing as part of the video, capitalizing on the game's popularity at the time. The footage was never actually used in the video, but they gave Tolop $50 and a copy of the single. When Emoji was 5 years old, his dad worked at a scrapyard. His parents considered it safe, so Emoji and his brother hung out there all the time. One day, Emoji decided to climb behind the wheel of a big old tow truck from 1927 that had always been there at the back of the yard. It had a push button start and a button on the floor for gas.
Like any child, Emoji started pushing things and making noises, pretending he was driving. Suddenly the truck, which had been sitting there for 20 to 30 years, just up and started. It was still in gear from when it was parked. Emoji's dad heard a loud bang from across the yard, ran over to see what had happened. He found Emoji sitting behind the wheel of a tow truck that had backed halfway up a tree. The tree overlooked a 100-foot cliff edge and was the only thing stopping the truck and its passenger from going over.
Honeybits was in a dark house at night and was supposed to be meeting up with some others so that they could investigate the supposedly haunted house. She couldn't find anyone though, and was all alone in the home. There was a maze of dark hallways, and Honeybits had this constant feeling of being watched. Around her, she could hear chuckling and giggling and knocking on the walls. Honeybits saw a glass door to the outside and rushed towards it to the exit. However, it suddenly locked in front of her. Shocked, she turned around, and the ghost of a little girl was standing right there whispering, "No, no, no," over and over. She freaked out and ran back down the hallway, and as she did, the walls began to morph into eyeballs that went in and out of the walls, staring at her. There were huge mouths with sharp teeth that would appear to try and bite her. The floor started to roll like there was an earthquake. Honeybits fell and started crawling and stumbling around. There was maniacal laughter all around her, and she could even hear a chainsaw getting closer. She got extremely dizzy and fainted before getting absorbed by a wall. When she woke up, Honeybits was laying in a bed in a small gray room. It was quiet and calm. And then she realized that there was no door. She started to panic but realized that she was paralyzed. The walls started closing in on her, and from the corner of the room, a huge demonic face formed and stared right at her. It just laughed and laughed at her as the walls got tighter and tighter until they crushed her to death. And only then did she wake up.
Pandora worked at a fruit and nut shop once, and she was a really hard-working employee. It was a great job, but the shop was full of cockroaches and moths, and there had been times when she found maggots in the snack packs. At the time, she had her nose pierced, and one day her boss came in from nowhere and told her to go outside. He took her aside and told her that her piercing was absolutely disgusting, and how dare she do that in his shop? He completely ignored her cockroach comments. She was crying, but he didn't care. He told her to go out and do some free sampling. Pandora had to go outside and offer people free chestnuts while bawling her eyes out.
The weirdest thing Gergak does is probably something that everyone secretly does. Gergak secretly likes to sniff his fingers at any chance he gets. He especially enjoys sniffing his fingers after eating a meal with his hands. Food, bodies, nature, nothing is safe from Gergak's sniffing habit. He doesn't remember when or why he started doing it, but he would enthusiastically breathe in the odors of everything his hands come into contact with. It's not a habit that his friends know about, but his family have definitely caught him doing it.
Slaptam had a major crush on the new girl at school. They had a lot in common, and they were pretty good friends. But after months of secretly pining for her, Slaptam decided he had to tell her how he felt. Slaptam confessed his feelings while the girl just stared. She knew he loved Pokemon, so she laughed and said, "Boy, you better make like a Zubat and stop annoying the hell out of me." To top it off, she sprayed him with her perfume, knowing full well that this would trigger Slaptam's asthma. She jokingly called her perfume attack a Max Repel and laughed when Slaptam fell to the ground coughing. I think he dodged a bullet with that one.
One time, Sid dated a girl who began to turn on him. It got to the point where she completely changed and he broke up with her. One day, she broke into his house and threatened him with a knife, saying, "If you don't have sex with me, I will chop your nipples off." Sid pushed her out the front door and locked it. The next day, he saw her at school with some of her friends. Sid's ex-girlfriend asked, while grabbing his collar and giving him a creepy smile, "Want these, babies?" Then his ex and her friends flashed him. He still has nightmares to this day.